It is my privilege to introduce Antoinette. We're going to work on this, Antoinette Cerrone Martin. She's been a past member of Job Team. She's not just past; she is a member, but she's had a lot. She's had some challenges going along this, and been a caretaker or caregiver. Um, but she has valuable information. We met clear back in about 2013. She's worked for some fine companies like iOmega, L3 Harris, or L3 Communications, Market Star. But she has a lot of experience, brings great insight. She's one of the people in our job team who, if she sees something and hears something, she'll say, "Hey, will you share information on that?" One of them being AI, but back in 2023 when we were looking at that. Um, as I reached out to her, she says, "What about a mini series for 4 weeks?" So I'll let her tell a bit more, but let's give a big job team round of applause and welcome her.
Thanks, Steve. I have been a past member of Job Team, and my husband has been as well. So it's a privilege to pipe in and just spend some time with you guys again and spend time with Steve. Um, he likes to tell a story about the time that we first had our first meeting, and I let him know exactly what I wanted and what I would tolerate and what I would not tolerate in a job team coach. And he gave me crap about it for like the next decade. So I guess that's fair. Um, like Steve has said, I have worked mostly with executives in all of my roles from the time I started my career back at Utah State all the way up until the time where I said, "Hey, I'm done. I need a break." Working 16 to 20 hour a day while still trying to be a mom and a wife and a human is not for me. And then after that, my dad died. And then I realized my mom needed care. And then she let me know that she had metastatic cancer. And that was our journey over the last 2 years, was taking care of her through hospice. So coming back up out of that, Steve said, "Hey, when you have breathing room and when you'd like to re-engage with the world, let me know and we'll spend some time together." So I appreciate that offer for him. And with the mini series, what we talked about was some of the things that trip us up quite frequently as we're job searching. I know both of my times going through a job search, I've been laid off twice in my career. Once was intentional. I purposefully positioned myself to be laid off because that's what my family needed at that time. Um, you get to a point where you need the money, you need the job, and you're really frustrated about what you're encountering, and you don't quite know why things aren't working the way that they should. And so, what we talked about from a mini series standpoint was, how do we begin to navigate all the volume of jobs that are out there? And how do we narrow that down? And how do we read through, I mean, let's be real. How do we read through the crap of a job description to identify if this is even something that we want to engage in? Or how do we read through it in a way that enables us to ask intelligent questions and get to the root of what we need to as we're searching and as we're applying for a job? And then how do we stand out? And once we get those interviews, how do we really ask the right questions? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been in two environments in the course of my career, and they were actually later in my career, so it shouldn't have happened, at least I think, where I got into an environment where I was like, oh, I should have asked different questions because this is what's important to me, and this is what the company believes is their charter and their mission. And this is how they behave. And this is their values, right? Which was antithetical to where I wanted to be in my career. So we'll talk about that as well and how you ask those questions and how you wade through the buzzwords and the prepared remarks that you get on both sides of the table when you're interviewing. And then we'll also talk about navigating and negotiating your worth and how do you know that and how do you stand up for that and walk away or know that you're accepting an offer that will lead you to the right place. And then what are some of those technicalities where they may say yes in the interview, it may look okay in the offer letter, but what should you be guaranteeing and what should you ask to see on the back end, and especially when you get hired? Okay, so are there any questions based on that? Anything else that you'd like to see or like to talk about as we go through the next bit of time that would be helpful for you as you navigate your search?
Okay, I know you guys aren't shy.
And maybe I'll ask the question differently. And I do this with all of the groups that I'm facilitating when I do team facilitation. What do you want to walk away with? And what don't you want to have to experience as we spend time together? Oliver?
So, just a quick comment. Everything that you mentioned sounds really quite interesting to me. I know when I accepted my last job that I just got laid off from, I tried really hard to ask the kind of questions that would give me some information about the company, and the answers that I got in the interview were not the same as the answers when I got to the company. So I'm kind of curious about what your comments will be about that particularly.
Right. We'll spend a lot of time on that actually, and navigating first both ourselves and how we process information so that we know ourselves really well as we go into the interview. I mean, at our age, we think, oh, I know myself really well, but there's always things that we can figure out in order to facilitate that conversation and then figure out how to read what we're getting and where to dig. Okay. So absolutely, we will do that. Mitchell, did you have anything?
Um, no, I'm pretty interested in what you have to say with a lot of things there. Also, the what am I worth type of discussion with a company. I've had a few recently that have uh, kind of been interesting as far as high and low and where do I fit in that category. Most everybody wants to say you're low, but you're really not. So yeah, I'm very interested in what you have to say.
Okay. And a lot of that goes back to what we have the courage to come back with them with, right?
Right.
And is that data based or is that emotional based? And for a lot of us, it's really hard to separate those two when we get those offers where we're like, oh, thank you. No, right? Okay. Anything else? Mike or Roger? Dax? No, John.
Yeah, just interested in how to detect the hidden gotchas. You know, things look like they're good in the offer or they look like they're good through the interview and everything, but
Mhm.
um, how do you prevent showing up and having it be different?
Right. Okay, so there's no guarantee on how to prevent, but there's things that we can do to navigate, right? All right, so your assignment, I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the detail in what Steve sent out, but your assignment was to bring some job descriptions with you. So we're actually going to do some interactive work. This is not just going to be me blah, blah, blah talking. I don't have the energy for that. But when we look at the real examples, then we can put to test what we are talking about and how and learn how we better navigate that, right? Because I have one perspective. But as we already learned when we were discussing Alicia's question, there are a lot of different experiences and perspectives here in this room. And so we're going to learn together. Okay. So one of the things that I found as I do career coaching, and I don't do career coaching like Steve does, right? I do more individual when someone comes to me and says, hey, I need help figuring out where I'm going. And I'm not sure really who I am or how to market myself, right? So that's kind of the niche where I focus, and most of it is volunteer work. But what I'm finding is that one of the common things is we look for a job title, or we look for a category, or we look for a company, and then we just go from there because we assume that if we use AI and we use our resume and we have a snazzy cover letter, that'll get us through the door and that'll get us where we're going. And what we're finding is that just like some of our content is AI generated or at least AI initiated, a lot of the job descriptions that we're seeing nowadays are AI initiated and perhaps also not real world based, right? And by that, I mean, how many of you have already looked through your job descriptions and went, oh, okay, so if we're doing all of this right, that's actually a two-person job. Or if we're doing all of that right, that's actually a three-person job. What are they thinking? And so we'll walk through a little bit of that today as we look at your job descriptions. And then we'll also work through how we weed through that. Because there are some where, honestly, and this may be my old age and my attention span, if I read through a job description and I know that that's a three-person job, no question, I don't even bother. Because I know that that company or that leader or that management is just going to go crazy. Mike, you have a comment.
I have a slightly different perspective on the size of the job question. I look at it as if the job is bigger than one person, that means I've got a team reporting to me, and I want to know how big the team is.
I like it. Yes. But when it says specialist or coordinator after it and not manager, right? So, and that goes back to that conversation that we had at the beginning. What are all those little getcha gotchas that we need to be aware of, right? It's almost like you need to develop like Marvel comic superhero spidey sense as you look through a lot of this, where you're like, okay, whoa, that sounds off. What else may sound off, right? And ask those questions. So let's go ahead and start with someone's job description. And what we're going to do right out the gate is we're going to look at what problem are they trying to solve? Can we read through that and can we identify that in the job description? And you may say, why do I need to know what problem they're trying to solve? That begins a whole powerful line of questioning and a really good way for you guys to modulate through what you want to do and what you're willing to do and how you want to approach those initial conversations with the HR team or with the hiring manager and how you want to structure your cover letter. Because there's a really big difference between approaching your cover letter from, hey, I'm really excited in job 1, 2, 3, and I know that I'm the great candidate for it, versus I'm applying for this position, and as I can tell, you have a certain number of problems that you're looking to solve for. And what I see is that they are these, and here's how my skill set aligns with that, right? Because it's a completely different approach when you let someone know that you're not just auto-botting your way through a bunch of job descriptions and resumes, and that you're actually purposefully considering what is going on in the company and why the position is created in the first time. I will tell you, in all of my years of hiring, and I've had multiple teams and multiple different businesses, there's been only one cover letter that came in that was structured that way. And that person got the job. Dax, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say this now, and then this can probably, your answer can probably work into like as we're going through. But in my experience, I have found I've had multiple interviews with companies that were hiring for their first marketing person, marketing leader, that type of thing. And they didn't know what they were looking for. Like the job description was actually in a lot of cases like clear that this was their first marketing hire, but I got into the interviews and it was like extremely clear where I was like, I can tell you don't know what you're looking for.
Right.
And I can tell you don't know what you need or how to like evaluate your needs and stuff. And it's all, and so, yeah. And again, I don't know that there's like particular answer in this moment, but just as you work through this, that's something that I've had that conversation with, where I've sort of tried to explain that to them. It's obviously I'm still here, so it hasn't gone well. But it's almost like in one case I told them, I was like, I can tell you what you need to do with this position. And and I was talking to the owner and the CEO and like a few different people. So that's just something that I've had experience with too, with these. And so that can work into some of your other answers as we go through these job descriptions, which might be the case with some other people, depending on, we have a lot of different disciplines and
Right.
here.
So Dax, I love this question. Let's just take a few minutes to look at this while people are bringing up the job descriptions that they want to scrub through and do that kind of counter espionage digging on today. So I have also worked in roles where you look at the job description and you're like, okay, title is one thing, job description is another. And then you get into the interview and the conversation, right? With HR and then the managers and then the people who are going to be interacting with you from different parts of the organization. And one question that, when you have that, one question that's very informative for you to ask and also shows them that you're open to that collaborative, let's explore this and build this together, is tell me what your desired outcome is. You invest money in this role. Where do you envision it leading you? And what's your baseline? Okay, yeah, we kind of got what we invested in. And then what's your next level exponential? Wow, this was so worth the money, right? And that's a different approach because, like you, I get into some interviews and I'm like, I can tell you what you need. So there's that conversation. And then there's also the conversation of, tell me where you want to go. Let's explore that together. And that opens so many doors because what do people love to do the most? They love to talk about themselves, right? And their hopes and their dreams. And you open those doors and those conversations, you learn about them, right? You may learn, oh, they're crazy and I don't want any part of this. Or you may learn, wow, that's exactly the environment where I want to be. And then you add more leading questions so that you can vet that and ratify that. So Dax, does that kind of give you one thing? Or shall we explore it more as we go through job descriptions?
No, it definitely does. And that is, a variation of that question is something that I've asked. I like your question though. But yeah, I mean, just as it comes up with, as we talk about other things, I think it's just something for everybody to keep in mind too. Sometimes people don't know what they're looking for and they're not trying to get three people for one. They just don't know that it's going to take three people to get that job done and they need to, help.
Right. They may have been told by a board or an advisory board, you need a marketing manager. And they're like, okay, Google, write me a job description for a marketing manager, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Who wants to be the first job description investigator? Do we have a courageous volunteer?
I know Mike has a really big smile on his face. That usually indicates something. That's usually a holdback. That's if you read body language. And I think Alicia has a big smile on her face. Maybe they're just smiling because I'm calling on them. I don't know.
Okay,
No,
so I was
in this
yelling at my
case, it was
Google.
somebody mentioned Google, and my Google speaker in the background came up with some silly answer, including a wah 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 wah.
Yeah, that
Same.
was the same here.
Well, remind me not to work for Google then. All right. Any job descriptions?
I can share one if you want, but I don't know if it's going to be something that's going to resonate for folks.
All right, let's do Mike and then Oliver. Did you have one to share too?
Yeah, I've got one that we can look at. It's quite technical, so again, I'm not sure if it's the first choice to start us off, but I'm happy to do so.
All right, so let's start with Mike and then let's go to Oliver's, okay? And Mike, will you share that on your screen, please?
Sure. I just put a link to it in the chat, but yeah, I'm happy to share it. Just move it over to the right screen. And do the screen share thing. Abracadabra, screen 2, share. Of course, that minimizes all the rest of you. Your faces become tiny on my screen.
That's okay.
So-
Fix my wrinkles.
Head of Global Advanced Analytics Patient Solutions. It's posted 2 days ago. 29 people have applied, which is pretty good in my space.
Okay, and Steve, have you talked about that whole 29 have applied and that number?
I think it's always worth a repeat,
Okay.
different audience, different week. So why don't you share that?
All right, so when it says 29 have applied on LinkedIn, that does not mean that 29 people have fully gone through the process. It means they've clicked on the button, right? So just,
And it doesn't include what may have happened on the company's end itself,
that's correct.
which most of the time I go to the company's website, find the job, because I find that sometimes these LinkedIn, Indeed, etc., the jobs are stale.
Right.
So they usually don't get my click.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's scroll down and dive into this. And again, what we're looking for is, what is this company trying to solve? And how does that match up with Mike's experience and what he's looking for? Right? Okay.
Well, apparently one of the things they're trying to solve for is they had somebody in the position who was an egomaniac.
What? What makes you think that?
Because of what they're asking for.
Right. And it could definitely be that, or it could also be that those are core values in the company, so
Good
that you're
point.
going to see that and hear that in practically everything across the board, right? But yes, I always default to the first assumption. Okay. All right. Now, when you see Global Integrated Insights and Analytics Team, what questions come to mind, Mike?
So I've been in global roles, so that doesn't bother me at all. I've managed international teams all across the U.S., India, Europe, and Central and South America. So, I'm going to want to know, what part of the globe are we covering? What part of the globe do you want to cover that we're not yet covering? So those are the things that pop in my mind.
Right. Another thing that should pop in and be part of future conversations, or even initial conversations, if it's important to you, is how long has this been an integrated global team, right? And is it integrated global by expansion or acquisition? Because those are two different balls of wax, right? And then this next one is really interesting to me. So you're a global head of advanced analytics. What does that mean? You are expected to operate in 24 time zones, 24 hours a day, right? This role is designed to specifically support Eastern time zones. Okay, so that should generate some additional questions. So what they're saying is, we need someone to manage the global chaos, but the global chaos may be small, but what we really need is someone who's available for our executives who live in the Eastern time zone, or available for most of our team who's based in the Eastern time zone, right? And requires up to 20% travel to existing sites. So, Mike, you've done the global thing before. Does that 20% travel sound logical?
It does, if you look at it from the standpoint of managing distributed teams through Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, that sort of thing. But you do have to do some travel, especially as you're acquiring and dismissing talent.
Right.
These things don't just happen automatically.
Right. And then also what you'd be looking at is, like you said, where in the world, right? Because managing a team in India is a lot easier and less legislated than managing a team in the UK, right? All right. So all of these questions, right? As you read through this, you're like, oh, wait, there's a lot in here. The successful candidate will deliver data-driven, actionable insights that create patient value and ensure the right allocation of resources for insight generation. What problem are they trying to address there?
They're trying to convince people to use their data.
Mhm. To use their data and also ensure the right allocation of resources. What potential problem have they had in the past?
Could be that they've gotten some models wrong
Mhm.
that have caused misallocations. That's a problem that I love to go in and solve. It could be that they're having difficulty with the pitch. We've got all this data. We think it does all this, but our clients, our users don't absorb it the way we think they should. Those are pretty common versions of that in my space.
Yeah. And we may also have an imbalance of where we have the bulk of our headcount and bulk of our focus may not be right. And we may be tripping over ourselves and missing opportunities to grow the business. Right?
Very good point.
Right. So, because I think every single one of us has been in a company, a global one, where we're like, oh, yeah, don't have the right amount of people in the right places, right? All right. So we've spent like a good 5 minutes just going over the first paragraph. And as Mike, as you're looking through this and looking at it from a questioning standpoint, which I'm sure you do already, right? But deeper dive, right? Is this still something that you want to investigate further? Or have you seen any red flags where you're like, whoa, maybe not?
I see plenty of red flags, but like a red flag in front of a bull, I look at it at the moment, it's like, okay, this is something I could charge after. The question then becomes, how much authority do I have to affect the outcome?
All right.
And as long as I've got the authority of the paycheck and the mandate, cool.
Okay. So we will be talking about this emotional intelligence and its role in our job search and interview process. But did you guys hear what Mike just said? Mike just said 3 really important things that you guys should be thinking about as you are going through your job search and building yourself as a person and building your repertoire of jobs that you want to apply for. Mike said, red flags are a challenge to me. They're an interest to me. I like challenges. Did I summarize that the right way, Mike?
Good summary.
Okay. I like the energy and the challenge that's put in front of me because I can solve it and that makes me feel good. Okay. That's an accelerator for Mike. It may also be a boundary where if he doesn't have that in his work, then he is bored, checked out, and unhappy. Okay. So we have
You
some
read me
nodding.
right.
Okay. All right. So, and then he also said, as long as there's a paycheck and I have the authority, paycheck authority. So Mike needs to be compensated for his worth. We all do, but for some of us, it's a little more important than others. And he needs to have the authority to do that because there's nothing worse for Mike than coming into a job, being given a charge, and then not having the authority or the people or the opportunity to do what he's been asked to do. Right? So Mike is already building the questions that he's going to be asking the HR person and his leadership team when he gets through the interview process. Questions like, when I see that there's a critical need or an issue to be addressed, tell me what that process is internally. Tell me how extensively I need to engage with my peers and my senior leadership team. What does that look like within your company? Because I've experienced a broad range. So back to Oliver's question, right? We ask questions in a way that invites, AKA forces, them to come up with situations that answer what's most important to us, right? Not just, well, will I have the authority and the bandwidth to solve the problems that I see? It's a tell me about. What would the process be? Okay. All right. All right, Mike, let's go on. You're scrolling down.
I get to this bullet point right here, and the question becomes for me, how much supporting versus how much leading?
I love that. Because you've been in both situations, huh?
I have.
Yep.
And I've been in situations where I was supposed to be leading, but they wanted me supporting.
Right.
And that's a recipe for frustration for me.
Mhm. Okay, so you see, as you're looking through all these bullets, you're like checking the box. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Every single person here on this call should be able to do the yeah, I can do that through most of these, or at least 60% to qualify you to apply for the job. The questions that you should be asking yourself is, what do I see? So what do you see in this next one, Mike?
So this one suggests to me that there's some institutional inertia, that they're not already saying we need this, we crave it, we're hungry for it. They're saying, I'll pick something you said a moment ago. It could be that they're saying, well, somebody on the board says we have to have this, but we're not so sure. So come in and prove it.
Yep. And not just you, but it could also be a systemic issue within the company that if you don't create those right connections to earn trust or earn credibility within the company, then they're not going to give credence to what comes in front of them, even if it is data-based,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Very true. I've
Okay.
seen that.
Yeah.
Don't want to go back to it. So at this point, I'm starting to soften on this job.
Okay.
It could turn around, but I'm starting to go, maybe.
And we're not going through this to say you should weed out every job but one that you want to apply for, right? We're going through this to say, be selective about what you're applying for so that you don't have to do the hard scrubbing when it comes time for an offer or when it comes time for the 7th interview. How many have had like more than 5 interviews for one job? Woo, right? So, all right, Mike, let's pick one more in this section, and then let's go down to that who you'll work with section to do some additional espionage there.
Okay. I'm not scanning it exhaustively at this point, but this one jumps out at me. I want to know what they mean. Do they mean that I'm supposed to fly into their East Coast offices and take people out for drinks twice a week? Or, what does a deep partnership mean in their view? It reflects their philosophy about managing people. Chances are there's a really good alignment as long as there's not some little gotchas in there.
Right. And to your point, when we read through that first sentence, there's issues, right? Because any good HR person is going to eliminate kitschy language from a job description, but right in there, you have a phrase that is probably very central to only the company, right? With the hub insights teams. Unless you're in the company, you're not going to know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that in that specific area, there's been problems, right?
By the way, here's where we get to the support versus lead.
Mm-hmm.
I just, my eye caught that on the way past.
Act as the corporate leader of data-driven insights to support tactical business opportunities and champion a data-driven decision-making culture. So
They
that
want tactical and strategic and culture all in one.
Mhm.
That means the team better be big.
Or the executives had better be malleable and not set in their ways, right? So,
Very true.
all right. All right. Who you'll work with.
That's not quite enough right there to accomplish everything they've said so far.
Okay, now that says direct reports,
Oh, good point. Thank you.
right?
I didn't catch that on my quick skim.
Yeah. So, hopefully each of those direct reports has 8 or 10 direct reports, in which case
Team is good.
team is good, right? All right. Let's go down to the qualifications section.
So this is kind of interesting. This is one that pops up frequently in the job descriptions I look at. They're looking for degrees in quantitative areas. My degree was in experimental psychology. The psychology part all sounds very soft and fluffy. The experimental part was highly quantitative, highly analytical, and very scientific. And I teach statistics. But, and this is a question back for Antoinette, for you and Steve and anybody else who wants to weigh in on it. When they see an experimental psychology degree, that's not going to come across quantitative, is it? How do I deal with that?
So, Mike, from my perspective, and then I can see Steve wants to jump in too, and then anyone else. What's wrong with you putting in the words that are needed?
As long as that's, well, okay. In the resume, that I can do that, no problem. And I do have that I teach statistics and all that, but I can add the other stuff. But in the workday framework, when they say, what degree do you have? And then all I get to put in there is experimental psychology. And if they're screening on what degree I have and it doesn't say statistics or science or any of that sort of stuff, I don't know what to do.
So, okay, so there is, let me qualify this comment by saying I'm an extreme black and white. It's either right or it's wrong human. Okay.
Okay.
And much to my children's dismay. However, did your experimental psychology degree include statistics and quantitative analysis?
Absolutely. In fact, I published in the American Statistical Association's journal at the time.
So I would say that my degree would be in experimental quantitative psychology.
Did we freeze?